Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mac. Joining me today is Ethan Sands of Cleveland.com. How you doing, Ethan?
I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here. Happy to be with the Mac Perry. Can't wait to get into the conversation today.
Man, this has been a long time coming. And in a season in which the Cavaliers have authored one of the best in franchise history. And it feels like every other game they're setting some type of new record. Most of them good, right? Really all good. I mean, they just came off a 16-game franchise record winning streak. And although they lost to the Orlando Magic, hopes are still very, very high around Cleveland that this team can finally get it done. Now, with that being said, you are a reporter, man. You're on the ground, boots on the ground over there. You just said off the air that you're at every home game. So you're up and close and personal asking some of these questions with this team. Is the vibe around town in that locker room just at an all-time high as compared to other seasons?
Nah, man. This team is weird in that sense, right? You would expect 16-game win streak, 15-game win streak. It's only the sixth team in NBA history to do that, to have two 15-game or more win streaks. But this team doesn't really care, right? They understand that there's so much bigger things that they have on their mind. There's bigger fish to fry, Mac. This team knows that the playoffs is what is going to define their season. It's not the regular season. All the records are nice. Sure, the Cavs are more than likely going to go after the 66 game record for their win total, which is the franchise record. They're going to try and go break that. But in all actuality, the real season for them starts at the end of April, right? When this team sees their first playoff matchup. And we got to see a little preview of what could come in the first round the other night against the Orlando Magic. Sure, the Cavs were without a couple of key pieces, but I definitely think this is a team that has just been chilling, man. They know that it's habits, it's principles that are going to help them win in the playoffs. And since Kenny Atkinson has got here, since he was hired, he's talked about playoffs. I went back to his introductory press conference in his transcript. I think it was like 10 times in that first conversation that he mentioned the playoffs. And I'm like, we haven't even started yet, and now we're here.
I think that many of the players, hell, probably every damn one of them would probably echo the same sentiments, especially the man at the top, Donovan Mitchell. This is a man who is no stranger to regular season success, and he is just dying to break through, get to at least the Eastern Conference Finals and beyond. And I know every single Cavaliers fan, including myself, is right there behind them with those same beliefs. People, I mean, you just look at the way that this team is being covered outside of local media, right? Nobody believes in this team long term. They don't believe in the postseason chances. And I can understand some of it because you have teams like OKC who I don't even know if you could really consider more proven than Cleveland, but Boston, they're the champs, right? And so that's the team, especially in the Eastern Conference, that everybody is saying, okay, that's the team to beat. If Cleveland can't get past them, none of this matters. And I think many of these players probably feel the same way. Maybe not necessarily Boston specifically, but just in general, they are ready to get to the playoffs. And I guess my first question would be for you after the matchup that we just saw. That could very well, as you mentioned, be the 1/8 series matchup that we could get come the playoffs. After watching how that played out, just on a personal level, is that a team that you would like to see the Cavaliers face come the first round?
Are we talking about I think that they can beat them?
No, I just want to know straight up. It's because in my opinion, I might be a sicko, but I kind of want to see these teams go at it again. I mean, there's some bad blood there. You can tell in terms of just the energy and vibes out there. You saw Paolo and Ty chirping at each other, and that's all healthy and good and in the context of the game. But on a personal level, is this a matchup that you would be interested in seeing in round one?
First of all, Ty was just picking up where his good friend George Liang left off with the smack talk with Paolo. But yeah, no, I definitely think this is a matchup that is about proving themselves, right? You see exactly what happened last year. Obviously, this is not the same Orlando Magic team. They're going to be without Jalen Suggs. They're going to be without Moritz Wagner. But 7-game series, man. Like, if you tell me that you get to face off against the same team, the same opportunity, and you can put them through like a gentleman's sweep, that's what I would think it would be. To me, this team is such to the standard that they will be able to gentleman sweep the Orlando Magic in a 7-game series after being pushed to 7 games. I think they can go into Orlando now and get a win rather than last season where only teams were able to win at home, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, when you talk about the dynamic of the game, when you talk about the players involved, Paolo and Carroll, Franz Wagner, and playoff environment, playoff intensity, and just on a personal level, like you mentioned, I think the test of the physicality is something that we want to see from the Cleveland Cavaliers, especially the guards and Darius, Garland, and Donovan Mitchell, and how they're going to respond. But if we're talking about like an actual series, and we're talking about not so personal, I think Darius is going to be worn out by some of these teams that are going to hunt him defensively. We saw it last night with Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero trying to put him into switches and pick and rolls and all these things. And when you talk about the physicality and you talk about Kenny Atkinson raving all season long about the defensive growth that Darius Garland has had, yeah, you're going to switch. Yeah, you're going to put him into those actions. But how is that going to affect you when you get to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston and having to get through those teams? Say you have to play Orlando, then the Bucks, then the Boston Celtics. Like, those are series where you talk about getting hounded, getting punched in the mouth, and how you're going to respond. And it's going to be wear and tear on the body. And I think it's definitely interesting to look at it from that perspective and how that could impact Darius and the Cavs.
I think that's a compelling point you make too. I mean, I think a lot of people are eager to see this team like truly tested, right? Get that first real series victory, this season and prove that it's not just been a ton of regular season success. Yes, they won in 7 last year. This completely different team, in my opinion. Roster is still very much the same. You got Ty Jerome back off of injury. You made a big time trade in the acquisition of DeAndre Hunter that really has changed things since he's gotten here. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but Kenny Atkinson has really just changed the entire feeling of the offense, and the defense really hasn't lost anything. And you've seen individual growth. And speaking of Darius Garland on that defensive end, this is a man who was constantly, and make no mistake, at 6'1", 6'2", wherever he is listed at, wherever you look at, because I don't believe the heights, but wherever he is listed at, he is always going to be a target. He is always going to be what a lot of people consider an entry point into this Cavaliers starting 5. And that's not a slight against them. It's just the fact of starting a smallish backcourt. But despite that, Darius has always given his best effort. He is now in the 88th percentile as of today in perimeter isolation defense. And he has tried to make the best of when he is switched upon. And you've seen that, whether it be Paolo or whether it be Jason Tatum, a player he's actually been very, very well against. He's held up very, very well in isolation against the likes of Jason Tatum. And there will be others, especially come the playoffs, which, in my opinion, you're talking about that physicality. Ideally, you don't want them to wear themselves out in the first and second round. You want them to get the easiest matchups possible. And I get that. From a logical standpoint, that makes a ton of sense. But just the fan in me, I am ready to see these two teams go to war. I'm ready to see Cleveland put belt to ass, as we've already seen with Cleveland and Orlando at one point this season. But to me, that matchup yesterday, I don't take a lot away from it, right? You look at some of the slumps entering the game from a statistical standpoint that had been going on. And I think it's fair to say that they're just that, right? I do not worry about Donovan Mitchell taking 28 shots and missing 20 plus of them, right? And I know that post All-Star break, Donovan Mitchell has not, from a statistical standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, been the greatest. But at the end of the day, they've won, right? They've won large, they've won small, they've gutted out wins, they've trounced teams, they've won in a lot of different ways. And despite taking that L, and I think after winning so many games, right, going on a long streak, you almost forget what losing feels like. But even in that, there were some positives yesterday. One of the positives for me was the play of Jarrett Allen. That's the next player I would kind of want to touch base on. Jarrett Allen was a player that flat out dominated that Orlando series last year in the 4 games that he played. Do you think that he has fully shed some of the narratives that has surrounded him entering the season? Or do you think he has to do that in the playoffs?
I think it's hard, man. Like, I've had these conversations with a lot of different people around the league, and like, narratives and reputations are extremely hard to shake
Yeah.
if they're not done in the playoffs, right? Because everybody, even if it's now become a meme, now it's become a joke, like Jarrett Allen has the infamous quote of the lights were too bright in the
It will
playoffs.
never go away. Never
It
go
will
away.
never go away, bro. Like I remember coming in my first season covering the Cavs last year, and I'm hearing this quote all the time, and I'm like, why is this so important? And now I'm like, okay, that Knicks series, the Orlando Magic series, like, and that's the other portion of it. You mentioned it. He was only available for 4 games of that 7-game series. I talked to Jamal Mosley before yesterday's game about what the biggest difference between this Cavaliers team and last year's team is. And he said that they're healthy, right? The Cavs also didn't have Dean Wade in that series.
Big
But
time
when
missed.
you
Big
talk
time.
about, yeah, and when you talk about Jarrett Allen, like he showed yesterday that he can be a dominant force on the glass, in the interior, in the painted area. But the biggest portion of it for me, my takeaway was he only got 2 shots in the fourth quarter. You're having a great game. You are being such a force on both ends of the ball, and yet you get 2 touches in the fourth quarter, and you go 1 of 2, right? Because we know the efficiency of Jarrett Allen. But you talk about the Cavs not being able to get him into actions, not being able to run offense for him. And obviously, Jarrett Allen's not a player that you run offense for,
No.
right? But you have to be, if you see someone taking over a contest, you have to put them in advantageous situations to be successful. Not throwing him up against Wendell Carter Jr. every single time down the floor and expecting him to do something. Paolo Banchero, the same way. Donovan Mitchell should not take 28 shots. You should not take 12 shots in the fourth quarter if you're going, 1 of 8 from 3-point range in that fourth quarter. Like, I understand. You are the franchise face. You are who everybody turns to. Darius Garland, your name is now Mr. Fourth Quarter. We get that. 2 of the best clutch players in the NBA. But if things aren't working, and that's what the beauty of this Cavs team has been throughout the entire season, if things aren't working, they've been able to go to other players. To yesterday's game felt like they were more chaotic. They were a little bit more on edge. They were trying to figure out a way to win, but they were only doing it through their 2 main avenues. I wish Jarrett Allen would have gotten more of an opportunity in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, in that fourth quarter, Donovan Mitchell took 12 shots. He was 3 of 12, 1 of 8 from 3-point distance. Darius Garland took 4, if I'm not mistaken. Jarrett, as you mentioned, got 2, right? And I know field goal attempts, you can't always boil that down because the guy might get a touch on a possession and the shot just isn't there, or they're just not one to force something. But it did feel like they went away completely from what worked in that first half. If I am not mistaken, they had 32 points in the paint in that first half, and they just completely went away from that. And I know some of that you have to credit Orlando's defense. The interior kind of collapsed as Cleveland just could not get past it. But at the end of the day, I do feel like Jarrett Allen is one of your guys out there that you can lean on as a source of offensive production. As you mentioned, you're not really going to run offense through him. You're not really going to create plays for Jarrett. He is a presence down there that you have to take advantage of when the guards are being taken out of the game. And for me, there is no reason. Like, love Donovan Mitchell, love Darius Garland, who, there's a conversation around slump with him, but he is absolutely in the fourth quarter and in clutch time, it's non-existent. The first 3 quarters, though, it's a real conversation as of late. But I don't worry about them overall. In that game yesterday, I just wish they had continued to go to Jarrett Allen, especially when you don't have Evan Mobley out there. And mind you, this is coming in a game where DeAndre Hunter is truly looking inefficient out there from the offensive standpoint. Just 2 of 11 from the field, could not really contribute too much. He did contribute a whole hell of a lot on the defensive end there, holding, if I'm not mistaken, Paolo and Franz and company to 1 of 11 from the field. But when nothing else is working and Ty Jerome is not really, getting in too much action in the second half, and Okoro is basically irrelevant for most of the game. You didn't play Javonte Green. Go to the guy who was getting you offensive production in that first half in Jarrett Allen. So that was my real lone gripe, in a very short list of gripes on the season for Kenny Atkinson. But I don't know. It's just one game. It's just one game.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note, right? We keep saying this, and the biggest portion of this conversation, and this is no slight to Jarrett Allen, but it's because Evan Mobley wasn't out there. Like, you cannot go away from the lone 6'9.5" is what he told me, because his afro gets him up to 7 feet. Again, we don't listen to heights on Basketball Reference or ESPN or wherever you look, because they're so wonky. But Jarrett Allen is not the offensive production player that Evan Mobley has grown into be, right? And Evan Mobley on both ends of the floor has so much versatility. And then you look at what we were talking about earlier in DeAndre Hunter. I mean, dude, you hit the side of the backboard. Like, I don't expect you to do those kinds of things. You're a guy that in the national championship game with Virginia, you helped them get to the overtime because of hitting a corner three. Like, you think, okay, DeAndre Hunter's in the corner, it goes up, oh, it looks great. And then I saw it at the side, hit the side of the backboard, and I kind of ducked. I was like, oh no, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And that, but the reality of the situation is Evan Mobley paired with DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley paired with Jarrett Allen, all three of them together. It's a different offensive and defensive mindset that the Cavs have. And Evan Mobley, to me, last night's game against the Orlando Magic showed exactly how important Evan Mobley is to the championship aspirations of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And obviously, as we've mentioned, Donovan Mitchell is the face of the franchise. But when it comes to the Cavs making a breakthrough, with the Cavs getting to the Eastern Conference Finals and further, because we'll get into this, but as you mentioned, the Boston Celtics, I don't think that the Cavs can say that they get to the Eastern Conference Finals and play Boston and they lose, and that's a successful season, because the whole season has been garnered around trying to beat Boston. And if you play them in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think the only thing you can expect from the Cavs to be happy with is a winning 4 times in 7 tries to be able to get to the NBA Finals. So yes, I'm of the belief that it is now NBA Finals or bust. It's not you have to win it. You just have to get there if the Boston Celtics are the team you have to face in the Eastern Conference Finals. If it's not the Boston Celtics, okay, the conversation changes, right? But you don't want to get just one place above where you were and then face the same team you lost to last season and be like, okay, we can still rebuild. No, this roster, this depth, this team, this regular season dominance, you need to have a successful season, which is getting past Boston in whatever capacity that may be in the playoffs.
I think you're 1000% right. I mean, you don't make the trade for DeAndre Hunter if you are Dan Gilbert and Kobe Altman, if you don't have intentions on contending for a title this year. Well, you know the CBA can completely fuck you up in the next couple of seasons. And it's all about capitalization, right? You have a number of contracts that are getting ready to kick in. You have to make the best of it. That's why you trade an expiring in Karis LeVert. That's why you move off of George Niang, who was a beloved locker room figure. You're trying to win a title, obviously. And they think, entering this season, I'm not going to lie to you, Ethan. I did not necessarily feel like the title window was open like this season, coming into this season. But the way that the year progressed, the progression of individual players, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland returning to all-star caliber form, and in some facets being the best version of himself. Donovan Mitchell willingly taking a step back, and not in a sense of, oh, his talent is starting to wane, but in understanding that, hey, I don't have to do this shit on my own all the time. And allowing and deferring to Darius and Evan a lot more, and others, and so on and so forth. But I did not feel truly like the title window was open entering the season. It just became that all of a sudden through the progression in such a short period of time that, and these are never things that you can predict, right? You can't predict that the team is going to have massive winning streaks during a season. You can't predict that certain players are going to become available on the trade market. You can't predict that guys are going to take the leaps that they have. But for all of this to mean anything, they have to get past Boston, in my opinion. It's not like it's title or bust, but I do agree. They have to get past Boston. They have to at least make it. And we all assume that's going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. So making that assumption, you can assume that in order for this season to feel like a success, they got to get to the finals at the very least. And that is where I'm at with that. And a huge reason that they will be able to go that far will likely be the play of Evan Mobley. And my next segue here in using that is there one specific area of Evan Mobley's game this season, in a season where he is, somewhat, I guess you can just full on say he's taking the lead, right? Is there one area of his game where you feel stands out above the rest that he just made the biggest jump in?
3-point shooting. It's easy. 3-point shooting. Like, you are going to be a player that is stretching the floor. It's no longer like you and Jarrett Allen are congesting the painted area because you are both in the dunker spot and you're taking up space and you're not allowing Donovan or Darius to get into the paint because they can't drive because you're again taking up space. Now you have Evan Mobley spread out in the corner. You have Evan Mobley bringing the ball up the floor and walking in to walk in threes. Like, this is the Cavaliers team that has created a spread offense. Don't even get me started on adding DeAndre Hunter into this mix. So you have a 5-out lineup that includes Evan Mobley at the 5 and DeAndre Hunter at the 4. Kenny Atkinson described it as the perfect spread offense last night.
Yeah.
Basically saying that this is a team that even if Jarrett Allen's off the floor, they can now go to an offense where you have a 7-footer that can come up and shoot threes over guys like Kristaps Porzingis, Paolo Banchero, whoever you want to put in front of him. He has been the confidence that has emerged from Evan Mobley this season is the second biggest thing, right? That starts with what he's been able to do, but it's also the work that he's put on behind the scenes. We saw it when he was coming back last season from the arthroscopic knee surgery. Crazy to think about. This guy has been coming back from injuries almost every season, and it doesn't feel like he's taken a step backwards. It's felt like every time he's come back, he's taken a step forward. Maybe that's a positive thing for when he's taken a couple of days off with his right foot contusion right now. See if he comes back and see how he is able to perform in this Western Conference trip. I think Evan Mobley just being a ball handler that can help space the floor and shoot and knock down threes efficiently. I mean, he's shooting 40% from 3 right now as a 7-footer. It's unheard of. Like, this is a guy that is continuously adding to his offensive game because we already know he's the front runner for the Defensive Player of the Year award. We know what he does on that. His impact metrics are through the roof when it comes to the defensive end, being able to just stand in the painted area and have guards and players look in there and say, oh, Evan Mobley's in there. I really don't want to go in there. And then go in there or creating something else. Like, that has been a known cause since he's entered the league. But the offensive growth, the offensive maturity, and the next step for him, for me, is the ball handling. We've seen glimpses of it. We've seen him be able to put guys into a spin cycle, put him guys in behind the backs and get them out of the way. If he is able to do that without committing as many turnovers or as many travels we see this season, I think that is the next step for him because he's already gaining the confidence of his 3-point shot. He's already been able to grow his playmaking, his offensive hub ability, and passing and facilitating all those things. If he's a ball handler that can put different 7-footers, 6'9", 6'10", whatever you want to say, in cycles, into actions, and have confidence with his handle, man, this guy is going to be scary, Mac. He's going to be scary.
I think that if you're an opposing coach and you look at Evan Mobley now versus what he could eventually develop into, that's got to be a scary thought to have to game plan against. In terms of the 3-point shot, right? 65 total makes this year. He's just 3 shy of surpassing all 3 of his previous seasons combined in terms of makes. The 3-point percentage is right around 36, 37, where you want it to be at for him, considering the volume. He's not necessarily scorching twine, but he's making his presence felt. And the lineup will have a lot to do with that. You mentioned being able to play 5 out with DeAndre Hunter out there and throwing out a lot of different looks. If you're Kenny Atkinson, who is right now, you're seeing it in real time. He's tinkering and he is experimenting with certain lineups. But Evan Mobley, he makes a lot of these things possible. You already mentioned the front court pairing between Jarrett Allen and Mobley and the spacing that Mobley is now providing between the two. And that was a big talking point over these last 2 seasons, especially after the way that the Knicks series ended, which still sticks in people's minds. But at the end of the day, we always said one of these 2 players has to develop that shot in order for this to work long term. And Mobley appears to be doing that right before our very eyes, in addition to continuing to hone that handle. Now, we've seen those turnovers kind of creep up, some of the things that are natural when you're getting elevated touches. And so Mobley is now averaging a career high 2 turnovers per game. But I don't worry about that, because with those increased touches, the opportunities for you to turn that ball over, they're going to up. I just hope that he continues to make it a little bit tighter, right? Being able to put the ball on the floor and put pressure via the dribble drives and dribble penetration, and utilizing the drive and kick game for a team that is just knee deep in sharpshooters out in the perimeter. That will only continue to make this offense even scarier for the opposition. Now, one of the names that you mentioned, the next guy I want to talk about here is DeAndre Hunter, who just lost his first game as a Cleveland Cavalier. Sad. The record is over, but going 14-1 during the games that he has actually been on the court for, that is no small feat, man. So what are your first impressions of DeAndre Hunter in Cleveland?
I mean, when this trade went through, right? Like, we had heard like different rumors about DeAndre Hunter finally becoming available, because he wasn't a guy that the Atlanta Hawks were kind of like shopping around, because obviously before the Jalen Johnson injury, they were making a playoff push of their own, and all these different things. But I'm sitting here, and when the trade goes through, I'm like, they got a 6'8" wing that was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, and he's torched them offensively when they played the Cavs. And then that's going up against one of the best defenses in the NBA. Now you throw him on one of the best defenses in the NBA alongside Evan Mobley, as we mentioned earlier. Like, when the first conversation, one of the first questions I asked him was like, what is the biggest thing that you're going to like be able to bring, or what do you remember about playing the Cleveland Cavaliers? And he was like, I hated playing against Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. And so now you're to the point where you're playing alongside them. It's insane to think about the production and the different things that Kenny Atkinson is able to do. And we're like, what again, we're not even 20 games into this different aspect of having DeAndre Hunter added to this roster. And yet he's learning so quickly the sets, the principles, the schemes that they're running. And it's also like he's able to create his own shot. That's the other biggest thing when it comes to DeAndre Hunter. He's able to shoot over defenders. He's 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan. And you can just go through all of these different progressions with this team. And it's not necessarily he needs the ball in his hand to be successful. But when it is in his hand, you don't have to worry about him going and doing something that you wouldn't want. He's going to create for himself. He's going to create for others. He's going to go set hard screens. It's the biggest thing is the defensive aspect is what they knew they were getting. The defensive aspect is what they knew coming in was going to be able to help them take it over. And the offensive end, that's just a cherry on top with this team that you can go to somebody else and be like, hey, Donovan, you can go take a rest. Hey, Dean Wade, you don't have to be as important as you were. Hey, Dean Wade, you can play with another defender on the perimeter. You can imagine a defense. Kenny, and I don't know how many times Kenny Atkinson has used this lineup yet, but I know he has gone to it. A lineup of defensively, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Dean Wade, and DeAndre Hunter on the floor with a ball handler like Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland running the show. You have an offense that's still able to spread the floor with Dean Wade shooting. And then you literally, if you run a zone with that, you have guys able to stretch almost across the entire court with their arms stretched out and being able to deter so many different offensive players from getting into the painted area. And that's just something that Kenny Atkinson has in his back pocket that we haven't even really seen yet. So I'm not trying to ruin Kenny's plans and throw out some ideas that he'll use in the playoffs, but these are lineups that you can expect to see in the playoffs if they need to go get a stop. If they play the Orlando Magic and Paolo's being too much, you can go to these players and deter them from getting into the painted area, deter them from getting to the free throw line, all these different things. So DeAndre Hunter has been the perfect acquisition for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he doesn't even care if he starts or not. That's the beauty of it.
That's it, it truly is the beauty of it, right? You want more mentality like that. We've heard Max Strus say the same thing. It doesn't matter whether he starts or whether he comes off the bench. I don't think any of these guys truly care about that as long as they're getting real minutes. And DeAndre has. This is DeAndre since he's become a Cavalier in his first 15 games on the floor, 14.1 points, 4.4 rebounds. That to me, the rebounding has actually been a point of emphasis because it's a career best for him in such a short span, short sample size, whatever, what have you. But he has been genuinely impressive in that regard. And he has led to a lot of additional possessions for the Cavaliers. He's shooting 48% from the field, including 48.5% from three-point range. He's 32 of 66 overall, 85.7% from the charity stripe, a very good true shooting percentage at 67.1%. He's playing about 25 minutes per game. That's wonderful. You can't ask anything more than what you have gotten out of him. And perhaps even better, as you already mentioned, on the defensive end. Ethan, this man is limiting his opponents to 30% from the field post All-Star break. 39 of 130. People are not scoring on him. He is locking it down. I believe that is the top mark still in the NBA since we've come back from All-Star festivities. He's been phenomenal. And it's not just coming against no names out there. It's not just coming against reserves. He is legitimately locking down the opposition's best players when he is out there. You've seen him do that to Jason Tatum. You see him take on a few possessions against Miles Bridges. The lone play that sticks out to me is when he got the offensive rebound, got the putback, comes back on the defensive end and forces a turnover. And he's just made plays like that time and time again since becoming a Cavalier. And he's just endeared himself to the fans very, very quickly. And I think, as I said before, you don't make a trade like that unless you are gearing up for a title run. And I think as it pertains to the playoffs, and this is where the conversation is going to shift gears here just for a bit, I have to ask your general opinion.
Matt, can I add something just before we get into this next
Absolutely.
segment? Matt, DeAndre Hunter, I think he's such a great defender, but I think we need to ask more of Kenny Atkinson when it comes to using him as the primary defender from the beginning of the game, right? Because we know he comes off the bench, but DeAndre, in these matchups, you talked about the Miles Bridges matchup, you talked about the Jason Tatum matchup, you talked about the Paolo Banchero matchup last night.
Beautiful.
The reason that DeAndre Hunter was able to stifle Paolo Banchero to the point that he was able to only make 27.3% of his shots, 22 attempts. He was 6 of 22, right? Was because DeAndre Hunter was starting, because he was on him from the get-go. In the games against Boston, we saw how much of a back and forth affair that was because Kenny Atkinson was putting DeAndre Hunter on different players. He was trying to test things out. No, from the get-go. Put him on Jason Tatum. Don't play no games. Put him on Jason Tatum and put him to work. Miles Bridges, don't wait till he has 30 points to switch the defensive matchup. I know we trust Max Strus. I know we want to have this whole argument. Is he a true small forward? Yada, yada, yada. He's a starting small forward for the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's 56-11. The conversation's over, okay? But in these matchups where he's getting cooked, Sam Merrill's getting cooked, Darius Garland's getting cooked, whoever you want to talk about, all these wing options, we went from having the Cavs having 2 wing defenders to now having a plethora. But I'm sorry, DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, those are your 2 best defenders when it comes to being on the perimeter. Dean Wade is also in that conversation. He doesn't get enough credit for what he does defensively because his offensive numbers don't help him. But DeAndre Hunter, when you have an opportunity to put him on the team's best player, when he's on the floor with them, don't stray away with that. Go directly to it. I don't care if we're talking about the zone. That's a different conversation. Use it. I know you love it, Kenny Atkinson, but you have DeAndre Hunter. Go box in 1. Put Jason Tatum in hell. Put him in hell. Like, put DeAndre Hunter on him. Sick him on him. Go to the box in 1. Whatever. We've seen this. Like the 3-2 zone, the 2-3 zone, the box in 1. Sam Merrill did it against Luke Kennard, but you're not going to do it with Jason Tatum? Come on. Like, this is a different situation that I think Kenny Atkinson has to go with because, of course, he's experimenting. Of course, it's the regular season. Of course, they almost have the first seed locked up. So you have the luxury of being able to try and toy and play with all these little things. In the playoffs, I do not care about any of these experimentations. That's what the regular season was for. Put DeAndre Hunter on the best guy. Let him do what he does best. And then let's see how the series turns out. I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no. That was actually exactly where I wanted to go with the conversation. The starting conversation in the playoffs. A lot of people, including myself, feel that it is matchup dependent upon who you're going to be lining up against. I'm not as much worried about Max Strus starting against the New Yorks, the Detroits, the Orlandos of the world, but I certainly understand the emphasis of what having DeAndre Hunter at your disposal means to everybody, including me, right? Now, yesterday, he held Paolo to 0 of 6 as his primary defender. In that last matchup against Boston, he held Jason Tatum to 2 of 6. Dean Wade was obviously pivotal in that matchup too, holding Jaylen Brown, I think, to 1 of 5. But at the end of the day, this guy is your best option out there when these players are cooking. And as you mentioned, and as you saw against Boston the last time these two played, Jaylen and Jason went off in the first quarter, and they continued to combine for what's like 70 plus points, 73, I think, 73 or 83 points. I can't remember, but they put up a bunch of fucking points. And the one way you can get around that is getting your best option to defend them out there. All due respect to Dean Wade, all due respect to Isaac Okoro. Love these guys. Love their contributions on the defensive end, especially. But DeAndre Hunter is the best of these options because of that length out there, because of what he offers you as an offensive hub out there at times. Being able to create his own shots, all of these things combined together to make him your best option against the Jason Tatums and Jaylen Browns of the world. So, yes, I'm of the mindset that in a series against Boston, at the 3, you have to start DeAndre Hunter. I don't know what Kenny Atkinson believes in that regard. I don't know if he's going to enter that series, the potential series. We're all hoping they make it there. I don't know if he's going to give Max the first crack at it. I kind of expect him to be honest with you, Ethan, just to reward the guy for all the hard work he's put in. But who knows what he ends up doing in that regard. I don't know, man.
Max, I mean, I hear you, and I agree with you that I think DeAndre Hunter in those certain matchups is the most important player to have in the starting lineup. But you can't start Max Strus for a majority of the season, and they said, "Oh, we're finally to the playoffs. We're finally to the games that actually matter. Get your ass to the bench." Like that's not fair to him. So I think if they're going to make the change, and I think. I'm not going to say I agree with you. I'm not going to say I disagree with you. I think it's basically a wash when you start. It's more so about who closes games. But if you're going to do that, you have to start making the change now. You have to start putting into your brain, into Max Strus's brain, like, hey, you're going to get bench minutes. We know you did that at the beginning of the year. We know you was happy with that. But we also know that you signed a contract to come to the Cleveland Cavaliers because you thought you was going to get starter minutes. Like, that's very much the hard truth about this situation. Max Strus signed to come to the Cavs with the expectation that he was going to be one of the biggest aspects and biggest role players of this team. And he's been impactful since last year. He's one of the highest net rated players, one of the best impact metrics, all these different things. But the reality, if you're going to make a change, you have to do it early enough on to not only help them reacclimate with the second unit, but also their psyche. Again, this is not only a physical game, this is a mental game. And with this Cleveland Cavaliers team, it's extremely mental.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can understand that mindset, right? I am never going to be the type of person to say, hey, you got to get your ass to the bench. Your minutes are cut. You're done. I don't believe necessarily that will end up being the case for Max. I do fully expect Kenny to give Max the first opportunity against Boston if they make it that far. I'm going to keep saying because nothing is set in stone. They have to get there, right? But I believe they will. And I think that Max Strus will play a role in that. I just think against Boston, I don't care how Kenny Atkinson structures it. I don't care if you got hurt. Just get DeAndre out there and play him. If you don't start him, play him starters minutes. Or at the very least, give him 26, 27 plus. As we've seen with Max, it's basically been the same thing. Max, I guess you could kind of say Max does not play starters minutes when it all boils down to it because he's right around 25, 26, 27 each given night, depending upon how the game is going, depending upon how much he is contributing, lineups, things of that nature. But man, Ethan, I really, really appreciate you for joining me today on such short notice. This is a fun conversation.
Hey, I'm always available for you, Mac. I appreciate you having me on. This won't be the last time.
Absolutely, man. Ethan, let the people know where they can find you at, man.
I'm at EJ Elite One on X, formerly Twitter. We just call it Twitter around here. Instagram, Blue Sky. I'm at EJ Elite One. We also have my content being posted on cleveland.com/Cavs for everybody that wants to go read content. I basically talked a lot about the Evan Mobley conversation after last night's game. But I also host my own podcast, the Wine and Gold Talk podcast for Cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. This is where you can find me yapping a whole lot about the Cleveland Cavaliers after each home game. We can podcast 5 days of the week. So tune into all of those things. Mac, I appreciate you again for the plug. I appreciate you for having me on. It was a lot of fun, my friend.
Go Cavs.